Jinn finally free, the Nightbringer begins his reign of terror on the human world to finally bring about his final plan. Can Laia, Elias, and Helene figure out a way to stop him in time before... This week we will be reviewing the final book in Sabaa Tehirs and Ember in the Ashes series, A Sky Beyond the Storm. So, let's get into it. If you guys have not seen my other videos reviewing the other books in this series, I have a whole playlist with those reviews on it. I will leave a link to that playlist up in the corner, so you guys can rewatch those videos if you want to before you watch this one. As always, if you guys forget the format for these videos, summary of the story, prose, cons, and then my final thought and rating of the book. With all that out of the way, let's get started. After the Nightbringer freed his Jinn brethren at the end of last book, he is ready to finally enact his final plan. He and Keris declare war on the entire human world and slowly start to bring their forces together in an attempt to bring about the final plan of the Nightbringer. While that is happening, Elias does his own work within the waiting place to try and uncover what the Nightbringer's final plan is, and what he finds out completely shocks him as he realizes this plan is much bigger than any of them suspected. Alongside that, Helene continues her war against Keris in an attempt to defend her nephew to make sure he can grow up and take command of the Empire, but in defending the Empire, she will lose almost everything. Laia, along with a new character named Remet, work to find the story of the Nightbringer in hopes that it will give them a clue of how to defeat him once and for all. All three of their missions force them together in one final climactic battle against the Nightbringer and Keris. First thing for the prose sections we're going to talk about is the epilogue section of this book. I'm not going to get into anything specific with the epilogue of this book, but I'm just going to very quickly talk about why I enjoyed the epilogue for A Sky Beyond the Storm. I actually really enjoyed the epilogue for A Sky Beyond the Storm because it was really satisfying, because all of the epilogue sections that we got for each of the characters made sense for each of them, because there were a ton of foreshadowing things for each of these characters that pointed to their specific endings. So none of the epilogue endings feel like they just come out of nowhere. They're set up for the payoff in the epilogue. So I really did enjoy these epilogues because it really made sense for where each of the characters ended. Again, I'm not going to get into specifics on where it ended in case you want to read this entire series for yourselves. I really did enjoy these epilogue endings because they made sense and they were, I think, very fitting endings for each of the characters. None of the characters ended up in a place that didn't make sense for them to end up, and all of them were very satisfying endings, and I really think Sabaa Tehirs did a really good job at writing the epilogue for this book and giving us satisfying conclusions to all of their character arcs. So, for the fourth time in one of these book reviews, I'm going to be throwing Elias into the prose section. Elias continues to be a really good character for me. I really enjoyed his storyline through the entire series, but particularly in this book. And that mainly comes down to his conflict with Moth, who is the ruler of the waiting place and Elias's master after he becomes the soul catcher. I really did enjoy their conflict because the way Moth works is he doesn't want Elias to have any sort of emotional attachment to the outside world, because if he does, it makes it a lot harder for him to be the soul catcher. Throughout this entire book, Elias slowly starts to remember his human life, and he slowly starts to regain his personality, and he starts pushing back against Moth. So I really did enjoy Elias's conflict with Moth. It was the highlight of this book in particular, because I always really enjoyed Elias as a character through all of the books, but as his conflict between Moth wanting Elias to be the soul catcher and Elias's willingness to be the soul catcher, but then him slowly regaining his humanity, was a really good plot trajectory for him. So I really do enjoy Elias as a character a whole lot, and that is why he probably was my favorite character of the entire series overall. For the second time in one of these book reviews, we are going to be putting Laia in the prose section. Now, surprisingly, Laia was another character that I really did enjoy in the last book, A Reaper at the Gates, because she finally got something for us to latch onto. with the ending. I'm not going to spoil it in case you do want to read this series. But at the end of that book, she really becomes a more interesting character, and this book just continues that when she finally meets Remet. I'm not going to spoil anything, but a very, very interesting character, and has a very deep connection to the Jinn and the Nightbringer, and that's really all I'm going to say about that. But I really, really enjoyed Remet and Laia's interactions, because there is a lot of moral conflict, because Remet wants Laia to try and understand the Jinn and why they're doing what they're doing, and Laia is just completely willing to not give them the benefit of the doubt and just go straight up, not willing to show mercy in anything. The dynamic between the two was really interesting and really enjoyable to read throughout the entire book. That being said, one thing I will say, I feel like if Remet was introduced earlier in the series, then I think Laia might have been a more interesting character if she had had Remet from the jump. Now, that's just my opinion, but I think that if that did happen, I might not have been so harsh on Laia for the first 2 book reviews, saying that she really didn't have anything that interesting. Just personally, if Remet was there and that conflict between the two of them was there from the start, then I think now we have a much more interesting character that I'd like to follow a lot more. You know, that's just my 2 cents. It's a small thing, but I feel like if Remet had been there from the beginning, it would have made a bit of a difference. Okay, so surprisingly, for the first time in any of these book reviews, we're going to be throwing Helene into the con section. Originally, Helene was a character that I really enjoyed. That was mainly because of her moral conflict she had between her loyalty to Marcus and the Empire, and her loyalty and friendship to Elias. That was a very cool dynamic. It might have been a very simple one, but it was a really effective one, because it really illustrated that she was torn between her duty to her country and her friendship to Elias. That was a really good, strong part of her character. That was something I really enjoyed, and the second book particularly, I really enjoyed Helene a lot more than Laia as a character. Things changed in the third book when we kind of got away from that emotional core of her story, where she isn't hunting Elias. When we get to A Reaper at the Gates, she's forced to be protecting her sister and nephew. That's a really good thing. Along with that, she has to play some crazy 3D chess match against Keris Vituria as Keris starts to put into place her plan to overthrow the Emperor and put herself on the throne. When we get to A Sky Beyond the Storm, I don't think Helene's plot works quite as well, because Helene's plot in this book, it's a lot more about her leading the remnants of the forces loyal to Marcus and her nephew, and trying to bring together all of the other martial families into one banner under her nephew's command. So that is interesting, but I don't think it works quite as well as having her have a direct emotional involvement. Yes, she has to protect her nephew, and that's it, but there is no real conflict for her. Like I said in A Reaper at the Gates, I enjoyed the political intrigue stuff, but Helene, at least to me, is one of those characters that works best when she has a moral conflict for her to fight against. That's not to say that Helene was a bad character. I just think that she doesn't work quite as well as she has worked in the other books. That's just my 2 cents. I just don't think she works quite as well without some sort of moral conflict within herself. Second thing we're going to be talking about for the con section is my thoughts on the climax of this book. Obviously, I will not be saying anything specific. If you guys want to go into this book spoiler-free, you're fine. I will not be going into specifics. For anyone who is fearing any of that, there will be no spoilers at this point. I have a small problem with this climax, and that is just how fast this climax actually happens. Because over the course of 7 chapters, the climax just takes place over this very short part of the book, because the climax is its own section in the book, and it is the shortest, whereas the other couple of sections of the book were fairly long. And that, I think, at least personally, is a problem. Because up until that point, I thought the book was flowing pretty well, everything was working, there were no sections that were dragging on that long, or dragging longer than they needed to at the very least, until we get to the final battle against the Nightbringer, and then this section is just incredibly short, and with that, I think the book stumbles a little bit, because the earlier parts of the book had been going so well, and then you get to the final battle, and it's just really short. So I just want to clarify really quick before I go forward. What happens at the final battle of the book isn't bad. It's just how fast the final battle takes place over. The final battle of the book takes place over, again, 7 chapters. That's really fast. And I feel like if Sabaa Tehirs had maybe taken a bit more time to lengthen the final battle and just given us more of that final battle, I feel like the book would have been better overall. But it's a very small thing. The final battle is still pretty satisfying, but I feel like it should have been longer. We could have a more properly feeling ending. Again, the ending is still good. I just wish it was longer. That way we can cover a lot more. It would feel a lot more satisfying if it wasn't so short. It still felt pretty satisfying. I just think the ending could have been better if it was longer. Give us a bit more time to breathe. Maybe the biggest complaint of the book is that the ending is a little rushed, but the substance of the ending itself is really good. I just think it could have been better if it was lengthened a bit more. Final thoughts on A Sky Beyond the Storm. Overall, I really did enjoy A Sky Beyond the Storm as the finale for the Ember and the Ashes series. I really enjoyed this. I think Sabaa Tehirs did a really good job wrapping all of the characters' plot points up in really satisfying ways and leaving them in places that make sense for their characters to have ended at. So I really do commend Sabaa Tehirs for doing that. Overall, I loved where Elias, Helene, and Laia ended up. Makes sense for their characters, with the only real complaint being that I think the final battle was a bit shorter than it really needed to be. Other than that, I really did enjoy this book, and I really did enjoy an Ember and the Ashes series, and I'm super happy that I spent the time to read the series and make all these videos for you guys. I'm going to be giving Sabaa Tehirs A Sky Beyond the Storm an 8 out of 10. Okay guys, you know the drill. If you guys have read A Sky Beyond the Storm or the Ember and the Ashes series in general, feel free to leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please just leave it spoiler free for anyone who hasn't read the series. That's all I'm asking. If you guys want to rewatch my Ember and the Ashes videos, I have the playlist linked up in the corner, so you guys can go check those videos out and just get my thoughts on the other 3 books. If you guys want to follow me on social media, I have updated my social media tags, and I will leave everything linked down in the description. My new Instagram handle now is rm_bookreviews. That's the same for my new Twitter. I don't know if anyone saw that, but I created a Twitter specifically for the channel, and that name is also rm_bookreviews. My TikTok is also rm_bookreviews. I will put links to everything so you guys can go and follow those accounts if you guys want. Down in the comments, if you guys have books you want me to do reviews on in the future, leave those down there. They will be greatly appreciated. Now that we have finally finished an Ember and the Ashes series, you know what that means. It is finally time for a ranking the Ember and the Ashes series video. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel and look forward to that one. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please do not forget, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss a video. That is going to be it for me for this week. Have a great weekend, and don't forget, keep on reading.